제가 한국에서만 영어를 공부했음에도 영어회화를 나름 성공할 수 있었던 3가지 이유에 대해서 공유드리도록 하겠습니다. 특히 독해, 문법은 어느 정도 되는데 스피킹만 현저히 떨어진다 이런 분들에게 큰 도움이 될 겁니다. 왜냐면 제가 영어 스피킹을 딱 그 레벨에서 시작했기 때문입니다. 곧 보실 영상은 며칠 전에 영국 원어민 선생님과 대화 중 일부를 발췌한 거기 때문에 모두 영어로 진행이 됩니다. 절대 어렵지 않기 때문에 어려운 영어를 저는 쓰지도 못하고 재밌게 시청해 보도록 하겠습니다. I will talk about 3 things or 3 factors. In hindsight, I believe contributed a lot to improvement of my English. Number 1, that has a positive impact on my English skills is external pressure. In other words, I put myself in a situation where I could not help but speak even if I didn't want to speak. It goes back to when I studied in university. What I did to make progress in my English journey is I took as many English class as I could. It doesn't mean that I have to take English class. I was required to take at least 5 to 6 credits of English class to graduate. That's a kind of minimum requirement, but I went above that. The thing that I wanted to emphasize here is that I took English class that had as many discussions, presentations, team projects. Some people who might be hearing this story might think that I was good at speaking English back then. Of course, I wasn't. And I was definitely worried about if my GPA there would take a huge hit. Of course, I was really concerned about that. But that's exactly why this external pressure worked so well. Just like any other students, I needed to keep up with my GPA as high as possible because I need to get a job. Otherwise, if my GPA was really low, then I would have not been able to get a good job. Basically, there was no way, or I would say I wouldn't have any other option but to show up every time in every class, even if I didn't want to. In particular, when you are not good at it, you don't really want to speak in front of any other people. Although I was terrible at speaking English, I just made sure to go to every class because I didn't want to lose my GPA. If I hadn't taken this class, probably I would have given up English in the middle a lot, but I couldn't. I needed to manage my GPA. Those who want to improve English skills and still study in university, then I highly recommend that they should take as many English classes as possible while they can, because once they graduate, then all of those chances are gone. There are other options, of course. Your class is one of them. By signing up for your class and paying money, that means I can't really, neglect studying English because I have to come to this class every single week. Then I need to prepare, I need to write. I'm not saying this might work for everyone, but at least it has worked for me so effectively. Before moving on to the second point, if you have anything to say or suggest, you feel free to say that.
Sure. You were talking about the value of working with someone, a teacher or a language exchange partner or a friend. And the phrase that came to my mind is someone to hold you accountable. I feel like for a lot of my students is to help hold them accountable. If you promise yourself that this year you're going to learn English, but the only person that you have to prove that to is yourself, it's easier for you to fall off the wagon or to get lazy. But if other people are aware of your promise to yourself, that social pressure can be really helpful, right?
Got it. The moment I saw hold someone accountable, I just realized one more time, it's one thing that I know some stuff, but it's totally another that I actually put that into action. Because I'm very familiar with hold someone accountable,
right?
But using that and speaking that in real situations is totally different. So thank you for letting me know that.
Sure.
I like that. Okay, so another thing that I make sure to stick to stay on the right track is writing intensively before going to every class. You must be very familiar with this point because I've been emphasizing writing quite a lot, even to my students. It feels like writing goes hand in hand with English class that I mentioned before. If I hadn't written extensively, then I would have never been able to keep up with class and therefore my English would not be as good as it is right now. For example, if I had a presentation, then I would make sure to write the full script before giving a presentation, including potential questions from the audiences. And if I had discussions or even team projects, I would always make sure to write what I would say, how I would claim my arguments in discussions, and how I would back up those arguments with specific reasons. There was no way for me to catch up with every class without writing in advance. You know, I was back then just one of the typical Korean students who was very good at taking a test like 수능 or TOEIC, but speaking was totally another story. I went to like a full length. I just made a point to ask at least one question for each class, even if I didn't have to. But the thing is, asking a simple question was still challenging for me. Whenever I raised my hand and then tried to ask a question, but I failed to complete a sentence because that felt really challenging and tough, which led me to write the simple questions in advance, which led me to, writing more, which led me to, at the end, better fluency. If someone asks me, where do I start to, make progress on English skills, then I would definitely say, if you don't know where you to start, then just start by writing. Just keeping a diary in English, whatever. That is all about my second point. So before moving on, do you have any suggestions or correction you want to add?
Very minor one correction.
Okay. Yes.
It was a slip of the tongue more than anything, I think. You said if I had a discussion, I would prepare by writing in advance. Just if I had discussions or if I had a discussion, everything else you said was great. And I totally agree with what you're saying for a number of reasons. Number one, I think of like speaking practice time like this, my class, as in some ways deliberate practice and in some ways supposed to represent real life, right? Be spontaneous and be an opportunity to express yourself. But the deliberate practice part is really crucial for if you've learned new expressions during the week, it's a really good opportunity for you to prepare in advance. Okay, I want to drop these things into the conversation because through the initial deliberate practice 2 or 3 times where you've really thought about it, then you can really absorb it. And later it becomes second nature, right? And it will just flow much naturally. The other thing is, especially for beginner, more intermediate students, speaking is rapid, right? Very, very quick. And you have to think on your feet. But what writing allows you to do is to take your time and think through your thoughts and get them down. And so I totally agree. I think
oh my God, now I feel like I'm seeing another myself talking about English. Absolutely right. The last one might seem less obvious than 2 others, and I would phrase it as a realization that my English doesn't have to be perfect at all. At the beginning, there were only 2 types of English for me. One is perfect English, and the other is wrong English, where my English fell into. It is probably because I learned English from a textbook. But the more experiences I had and the more class I took, the more English speakers I faced, the more I realized that nobody's English was perfect and everyone's English sounds very different against my expectations. Here, what I mean by perfect English was American English, because that was the only English that I experienced mostly through 수능 or TOEIC. But then every time I met different speakers from different countries, including of course America, and then Brazil, Germany, Japan, everybody has different accents, everybody has different pronunciation. It doesn't really look like all the people do have perfect English. I've noticed a lot that even some people who look like speaking very well, very fluently, do make a lot of mistakes when I pay close attention. Along the way, I've realized more and more that my English doesn't have to be perfect as long as I can deliver my thoughts and my expressions to other people. And that realization has really helped me to stick to my English. If I had been obsessed with perfectionism, then I would have given up a lot because I would have exhausted myself thinking that I shouldn't speak English unless my English sounds perfect, which is far from the truth. And nobody speaks English perfect unless they are native speakers just like you.
My English is far from perfect.
Okay,
be honest.
thank you for your humility.
No, it's truth.
Does humility work here?
Yep,
Humility?
totally.
Okay. If someone is serious about learning English and if someone really needs to improve their speaking skills and listening skills, instead of just studying yourself alone with textbooks or videos or whatever, I believe they better go out and throw themselves into real situations where real speakers speak real English. Once you're equipped with that perception that English doesn't have to be perfect, then you to be more confident and you to be more willing to speak more comfortably and more confidently, which of course will lead to better fluency at the end. There was a particular time when I felt this quite a lot. As I told you, I took a lot of English class, and there are of course native professors, but also there are also Korean professors. And whenever I hear explanations from professors or presentations from Korean professors, I could immediately see that they didn't acquire naturally their English. Still, their English sounded amazing. But I noticed that their English was not perfect, which is totally okay. And I kind of justify myself that my English doesn't have to be perfect either. Because professors are one of the professions that are viewed as the most intelligent people. And if they don't speak perfect English, then why would I have to speak perfect English? I set one of them as my role model, who was very good at explaining stuff, although his English sounded a little bit not enough from others' perspectives. I mean, native English speakers. His major was, by the way, like international politics or something, but he didn't have any trouble explaining deep concepts, complicated concepts. He really helped me to realize that the English is just a tool to communicate, to deliver your ideas to other people. What do you think of the third point?
I totally agree with you, and I spend a lot of time discussing this with my students who, they feel the frustration after 10 years, 20 years of studying English that aren't as good as they hoped they'd be or something like this. How can they get over the intermediate? A big part of it is letting go of this idea of perfection, which doesn't exist,
yes.
to be honest.
We only just strive for that, which we can't really arrive at.
Exactly right.